Today, we're looking at the policy and procedure guide for online course evaluation. What you can see here from this perspective of this course, from the part one, there is a combination. I'm giving credit to the INACOL, QM, the HE 6th edition, the UDL, and IDEA for um, local assessments, the IDEA. So what you can see on this evaluation form is the main components. They are in alignment with the INACOL, looking at 21st century skills, course evaluations, student assessments, instructional design, and content. There's also two sections. One I placed for conformance, which is what the organization should expect. I looked at the more specific HE guidelines, looking at the higher education guidelines, from this being a secondary to high school, because it's a professional development of high school. Looked at the HE as the good guidelines for conformance, or what the organization should expect. I also had some general statements about compliance to the state and local laws, including standards aligned lessons, and then an area for evidence. So what we're going to do is I'm going to model you through this component, how we would go through and evaluate the virtual module for Module 6. First thing is looking at contents. The contents, the course should have objective and course program competencies and measurable outcomes. Again, as with professional development, I have this component listed here when I would go into my modules. And if I look at the first component, Module 6, the introduction. So I have the actual module objectives listed here, which is assess policies and standards from several organizations to improve online course and programs, and create a policy for online courses or programs to align with the UDL guidelines. That's the components of my goals or my objectives of this module. The student, which in this case would be the professional development participant, is to evaluate an online program through a standard and policy checklist. That policy checklist is something that was developed, again, that we will be using here. So in this section, I would be able to note those components, including the introduction. The module and unit level of learning objectives and competencies described in the outcomes are measurable. Again, that's something that I would have to work on, with the sense of how would it be measurable. But with this being a check sheet and a check guide, this would be a completion module. So you would be able to complete that module. And the learning objectives and competencies are stated clearly in written form from the learner's perspective and are predominantly located in the course. Okay. Again, that would be all in that section there for the first part, the module introduction for the students. From a compliance standpoint, it should be standards aligned lessons that support each learner in compliance with their GIEP or IEP. And that's where I'm looking at the perspective of the IDEA and the UDL template for how we're going to design this course to make sure that it meets the needs of all learners. As we come down into instructional design as a component, the instructional material contributes to the achievement of the stated learning objectives and competencies. The relationship between using instructional materials and the course and completing learning activities is clearly explained. There also should be standard-based practices that support each learner. And I also included two of the UDL principles that we talked about from Module 1. First one would be providing students with multiple means of representation, including the presentation of information and contents in different ways. And the UDL Principle 3, which was to provide multiple means of engagement. So if we look back through the modules, you'll see in each component, there are different options for student learners. So when I'm looking at here, the hot links, of course, there are some reading activities here for the students to use. There's also going to be a PDF document, which would be the evaluation tool. I also include here for learners that prefer the ability to type on a document or to resize their fonts for viewing perspectives, they could use the Google link that's provided there. I'm going to model this presentation in a video, which would be the virtual video here. It will also be available with closed captioning so that the students can read through and be provided with that transcript of learning. Finally, you'll see here I have a link to the document, and again, a modeled picture of the document so the students can reflect upon it, and a discussion board where students are able to, or encouraged to integrate videos or infographics, or create suggestions for edits in any different way, again, supporting those UDL principles through the actual strategy that how it's being implemented. The next would be student assessment. This is a little bit more in depth. This is looking at something about the assessment of measures achieving of the stated learning goals and objectives. The course grading policy would be clearly stated. And again, I'm looking at it from the high school perspective. Specific and descriptive criteria provided for evaluating learners' works and their connection in a course grading policy. The assessment used is sequence varied and suited to the level of the course. And the course provide learners with multiple opportunities to track their learning progress with timely fashion. I would say in evaluating this section as a professional development course, this part of the course I would probably be pretty low in from the perspective of assessment. Because this is being modeled as a professional development course, everything's about completion based and then discussion after the fact. So I look over here again to the state standards. It's the standards aligned assessment that serves as a formative and summative assessment guides instruction. And also UDL Principle 2, which means providing multiple means of actions or expressing, including differentiation of how students can express what they know. This is a good idea for looking at that discussion component about how could a student share. These could be things like we've embedded in other classes, such as looking at the Google Drawing or Padlet as a way of being able to express what they've known, whether it be as an exit ticket or a formative or summative assessment. Course evaluation looks at the navigation facilities, facilitates the ease of use. The course design facilitates readability, and the course provides accessible text and image files, documents, learning management system pages, and web pages to meet the needs of diverse learners. Again, this is implementing this whole idea of a UDL compliance that goes through IDEA based off of UDL. It also is going to look at standard-based instruction that is evaluated based off of implementing new standards for state compliance. So I feel that this course, in looking at this perspective of what we just talked about from the whole aspect of all modules, has a little bit of good for every student and every individual learner. One thing that I would say that I would look at will be a text translator. If you have a person who speaks English as a secondary language, we could be able to implement that as well using different internet tools. But again, I have not done that just yet in this course. So that would be something that I would consider. The last part would be the 21st century skills. The tools that's used in this course support learning objectives or competencies. The tools promote learning engagement and active learning. A variety of technology is used in the course, and the course provides learners with information protecting their data and privacy. Each component of this course, every module, has used a different tool or implemented a part of each tool in order to use the application component, meaning that the tool itself didn't serve as the product of the learning, it became a tool of the learning. Again, this whole idea comes through the compliance of state and local implementation plans and practices. So this last column over here, this evidence, is where we could cite it or we can mark off depending on how you're going through. I just wanted to model that discussion, and hopefully that gives a little bit of clarification for the next component, where I'm asking the student participant, the professional development participant, to do the same for a course that he or she has designed.